Welcome to the Alpha Warrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the Alpha Warrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the Alpha Warrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, The Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
Are you guys in for a treat? This is the Alpha Warrior Show. I am your host, Alpha. Operation GLADIO Night, Part 19, Blackmail. And as I understand it, the Colonel got some interesting information that just went boof. So we're all about to have our minds blown tonight. But before we do, Alphas need to pay the bills. So let's get to two great, awesome sponsors real quick, you guys. Big debate coming up tomorrow between Trump and Biden. And for those of you who have not been tracking, the yen has completely went on a downward spiral. And, you know, it's a marker that a lot of people have been considering. But guess what? Be prepared. It's easy. It's fast. The rich are buying gold. They're buying silver. My partners over at Goldco have the ability to find out what is best for you. That's at alphalikesgold.com. We've talked about the digital dollar. We've talked about Big Brother. We've talked about diversification. We have talked about the IRS threat. We have talked about the bank wipeout. We have covered everything. And now it's time for you to go and visit alphalikesgold.com. Talk to my partners over there. Tell them about your individual situation, what you're looking to do, and protect what is yours, you guys. And now our next sponsor, and then after that, we are commercial free until the end of this. America's favorite mustache, as always, Mr. Landell, one of the greatest patriots. And I'll see you guys in 60 seconds.
I'm excited to announce we're having a huge MyPillow spring sale. And here's a few examples. Buy one of our MyPillow 2.0s, you get another MyPillow 2.0 absolutely free. Made with cooling technology, the best pillow ever just got even better. And this just in, 9 brand new colors and styles of our Percale bed sheets. They're made with the finest long staple cotton, and now you can save 50% or more. That's as low as $24.98. And for the first time this year, I'm bringing you our My Slippers and Sandals for as low as $25 a pair. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get your MyPillow 2.0s. Buy one, get one free. Percale sheets as low as $24.98. My Slippers and Sandals as low as $25 a pair. And for a limited time, when you order $75 or more, your entire order ships absolutely free.
Absolutely free. So once again, alphalikesgold.com, my pillow, my store, promo code alpha, all the links for the descriptions to my guest tonight and my sponsors is all down below. You guys only have to type it out. Just click the links. So let's get into it, ladies and gents. The Colonel is with us tonight. Operation Gladio, Part 19, Blackmail. Sounds like we're going to be into an interesting dive tonight.
Okay, so I don't normally, I've never done this before. I'm just going to caveat that. So it's going to be a little chaotic. I normally have extensive notes, have done days of research on anything that I bring to the Alpha Show. Today, something happened. This has happened before, but I didn't feel comfortable kind of winging it. But today we're going to wing it. We're going to go on a dive together. And so let me set this up. I wrote a paper a while back about a guy by the name of Wilson, who was the prime minister in Britain. And I want to get his name specifically. And when I did the paper, the whole question was, because he was definitely gladioed. And I'll spend just a little bit of time explaining it. Yeah, Harold Wilson. Anyway, that's not important. So he became prime minister. And immediately MI5 and MI6 started basically trying to sabotage him. And it's all the details are on Substack on Was Trump Gladioed? That's the name of the article. So when this gets done, go read that. It'll fill you in on what kind of set me off on a tip that I got after the show today. So basically we were doing England as far as we're on Europe right now. And so England today was England. And I brought up the operation because the real interesting part, I'm going to tell you the end of the story first. In his second term, and they went to the extent of the whole IRA, the Ireland, there were bombings and assassinations and all of that stuff back in the day, like in the 70s, 80s timeframe. All of that was part of Operation Gladio. Anytime they needed a diversion in the UK, they used the conflict up there to set things off. Which was kind of shocking to me when I first began reading about how they would do that. So basically they had a bunch of Gladio agents up there, chaos agents, and would just start shit to divert from something that was happening like in London. So the thing that kind of sealed it for me was during his second term, he actually resigned a little early. He resigned 2 days after he got a visit from the then CIA director, who happened to be George H.W. Bush at the time. So George H.W. Bush gets on an airplane and flies over there and meets with the Prime Minister of England, and he immediately resigns. That's kind of shocking.
What did he tell him?
I don't know. Right? So that to me has always left like this big question mark over all of what was going on in the UK. So we go through all of this today, and immediately after the show, someone DM'd me and they started talking about a thing called the Kincora Boys.
How do you spell that?
Kincora home. So Kincora Boys Home. And I'm like, okay, I know all about the whole IRA. And I do want to, because we're going to get into this, but I want to expand just a little bit about that. I read a book a while back that talked about a guy that had taken a job at a shipyard in the United States, a young kid. And that shipyard was basically part of a mafia fleet that was doing arms over to the IRA, Operation GLADIO people, and bringing drugs back. They were shipping drugs all over the eastern seaboard out of this shipyard. And originally he was a mechanic and he didn't know all of this stuff was going on. But the closer he got to the shipyard owner, the longer he worked there, the more they kind of brought him into the fold. So he goes and basically delivers arms over to the IRA GLADIO agents in this book. It's a fascinating book, and I'm in the middle of moving all my stuff out to my new digs. I have a cottage that we built in the back of the property here that we're gonna maybe next Wednesday do our first show out of.
Very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, so I have that piece of the pie, and I knew that they were shipping arms in there and that was somehow connected to GLADIO. And then I also have the Prime Minister information. What I didn't know, so I was, I sent, just before the show, I'd sent to Cousin It, one of my researchers, what I was going to do the show on. And I told her the guy's name that we're going to talk primarily about is Louis Mountbatten, 1st Earl Mountbatten to Burma. He is a relative of he's like the great grandson of Queen Victoria. He has a long lineage, and we'll go over that in just a second. But he's a pervert. He's a pedophile. And everybody knows that. And she says to me, oh, he's the Marc Dutroux of England. And he is. And for those of you who don't know who Marc Dutroux is, his name is spelled M-A-R-C D-E-T-R-O-U-X. I believe, Dutroux. He's the Belgium pedophile that is spending like 99 years in jail. He was such a prolific pedophile that they found multiple dead bodies of little kids in the basement of his home when they finally raided his house. He arranged hunts for children out in the woods in Belgium. And he was kind of the go-to guy for NATO for blackmail. So anytime, because he lived right there around NATO headquarters. And so if somebody came in that they wanted to compromise, Mark was the guy. And it's a horrific story.
He's a creepy looking dude.
He is totally creepy, but so is Mountbatten too. They have that look. So while I talk about him and I tell people to go read him, I don't generally talk about this type of thing because it's deeply disturbing to me. And it's not that it doesn't need to be talked about. I'm just not the person to do it. It's not my area of expertise. But because this dovetails exactly into GLADIO as it relates to the IRA, and I'm going to bring up several elements of this and tie it all together. And I'm going to start here because one of the things in the article that I'm going to focus on in a second that comes up repeatedly is a thing called the Monday Club. The Monday Club was a organization that was set up that was associated with the conservative party in originally called the Ulster Unionist Party, UUP, in Northern Ireland. And what was interesting about that to me is that it was founded in 1961. It primarily was what we would refer to today as a racist organization that functioned primarily like when we talked a while back about Algeria and how the French would not allow Algeria to have their freedom in their Northern African country, obviously primarily Black. And it was a very racist setup where you have the minority colonial powers. They think the people are ignorant, they can't govern themselves, and so they're doing them a favor by being in charge of them and using them like slaves and stealing all the resources. So this Monday Club is set up primarily like that. So they focus specifically on maintaining Rhodesia, which was a British colony, and South Africa within the fold of a white minority being in charge of the Black majority. And so they focus primarily on that type of thing. And it's a huge club. For example, by 1971, they had 35 MPs that belonged to this club. Six of them were ministers and 35 peers. So, and they basically, in all branches of the government, not just one party, this was a very popular movement. We'll just leave it at that. Here's just a little bit. The group brought together supporters of Rhodesia and South Africa. The main impetus for the group's formation was to oppose decolonization. So anyway, and it has a whole bunch of people. If you look them up on Wikipedia, it has several people, a whole list of people that were members. But I just wanted people to know what that is because it comes up multiple times in this article. So the article was written in a magazine called Village Magazine. And this article starts off with rumors that Lord Louis Mountbatten was a pedophile. And there was a book that was written about him being a pedophile. So immediately once the book comes out, there was a lot of articles that got written about the subject. The book is called The Mountbatten, Their Lives and Loves. And it was written by a guy by the name of Andrew Lowney, Lownie. He was a member of the Conservative Party, which is kind of the association of that Monday Club. So he's very into this entire network. So he's not like this fluke, if you will. During his research for the biography that he was writing, he gained access to Irish state files, including what they refer to as GARDA, G-A-R-D-A files about Mountbatten. And he wants all of them, but he keeps getting told he can't have them, which makes him even more interested in why he can't have them. And so there was a deputy commissioner who died, and he said that there was a lot of disturbing rumors about Mountbatten and his sexual activities. So another Garda intelligence source says that he had heard stories that while Mountbatten had been living in India, that he basically was having regular sex with a 14-year-old boy the whole time he was over there. If Garda intelligence, led by a man named Larry Wren, W-R-E-N, during the 1970s, knew anything about Mountbatten's pedophilia or the presence of cars with North Ireland registration plates on them, or of teenage boys visiting his property at Clossibon, that was the name of his country estate, in the company of older men, he did nothing about it. The Garda security at the Mountbatten's estate must have noted registration plates, and what he's getting at is he had security. So he's a big deal because he's related to the royal family. They would be keeping records because he basically had like a gate guard that kept track of the comings and goings of people. And so there's a guy by the name of Joe Mains, M-A-I-N-S, and he was the warden of this Kincora boys' home. And he basically was bringing young boys down to Mountbatten's estate. And this author is trying to get access to the files. And he says that he refers to this thing as an Anglo-Irish vice ring multiple times. And it's because there's a whole bunch of people involved in it. And it was a coordinated effort because this Kincora boys' home is not the only source. There was like two other like homes for youth that they were using as supplying pedophiles with young kids. So while the Kincora scandal was exposed in 1980, it was not until 1982 that allegations about MI5, which is their FBI, and MI6, which is their CIA, involvement in the affair began to appear in the press. So this is where we get to the state apparatus actually using these pedophile rings to blackmail people. So when Wren, W-R-E-N, became the Garda commissioner in early '83, which is right after the big explosion that their intel apparatus was involved in a pedophile ring, he had developed close links to the exact same British intel that had just been exposed. So like he's coming in to mop it up. If the logs of cars visiting Clossibon proved to be missing, an inquiry should have been held in order to find out what happened to them. And this guy was writing this article at the time, trying to embarrass them in order to release the log so that they could prove that the cars from this boys' home was coming directly to Mountbatten's estate. So Mountbatten's movements were of enormous importance to the Garda in the 1970s. Typically, the first they would hear about his arrival at his country estate was a call from MI5 in London to alert them that he had boarded the ferry en route to Dublin. Mountbatten's reputation inside Garda was that of a man who was reckless about his safety. He often gave them a security headache. On one occasion, he managed to disembark before the ferry even got to where it was going. However, this occasion, his car had broke down and they had to rush to his aid. His vehicle was towed back to Garda and it had to be repaired. While the repairs were taking place, Mountbatten had been given a tour of the headquarters of like the Royal Constabulary in that area. So everybody was noticing about how charming and wonderful he is. And people made note of the fact that they could kind of see how he got away with some of this awful behavior because of him basically going out of his way to be nice to the common man. So the Garda keeps refusing this author any information about his investigation, the logs, and he basically he's just not going to take no for an answer. So the head of the Irish police, Garda Commissioner Drew Harris, who was a former Royal Special Ops guy who worked with MI5. You see how they're all connected here? Everybody in this story is intel. To date, he has not intervened to have the logs made available. So basically, they've deployed out in all of these positions intelligence people in order to thwart any effort to get any of the information. So it says the Maine's log are political dynamite, even 40 years later, because of the royal family. And at the time this was written, the Prince Andrew's Jeffrey Epstein thing had just exploded. So now you've got Prince Andrew's with young women, that's a pedophile, and you've got Mountbatten, who is a pedophile as well. So
sounds like a family affair.
You think? So they're really trying to keep Mountbatten information out of the news.
You know who else that sounds like? The freaking Biden family.
It does, right? I think we're seeing a pattern here.
We are. Let me interrupt real quick, Colonel. There's a lot of you that are watching on X right now. Quite a few hundred of you watching on X right now. There's been a lot of stuff circulating. A lot of accounts and profiles have been deplatformed in the last 24 hours. Like hundreds of people just from our circles have been deplatformed. So in the event that myself or the Colonel is deplatformed, you can find the links to us on Rumble down in the description below. We'll find a way to come back. Also, Rumble's been having some sound issues. I hear you guys on that. I haven't pushed it for obvious reasons, but I do have a new YouTube channel that was built, and it's at Real Alpha Warrior. So if you guys want to go and subscribe and just have that as a backup, so in the event that Rumble has an issue, you can go and watch it on YouTube. Things are going to get worse the closer we get to November, you guys.
And they're very, 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 very sensitive when you start talking about people in high positions that are pedophiles.
Mm-hmm. So with that, I give it back to you.
All right. So then this author finds out, weirdly enough, our FBI has a file on Mountbatten. Now, why would we have a file on a British citizen in the FBI? So in the file, it reveals that Lord Mountbatten is a pedophile and that he has a lust for young men. The FBI dossier was compiled by American agents during World War II and the Suez Canal crisis. Because again, now think about that, because the Suez Canal crisis was the Egyptian government kicking the British out of Egypt. And that was basically, then the British comes back and tries to coup the government in Egypt. So all of this is GLADIO as we're going along. You're just literally living it. And so Mountbatten then became the Supreme Allied Commander of Southeast Asia. Basically all of this information is in the FBI file of everywhere he went. And then, so of course, you know, he was in India and he was in Burma. And again, all of those places that he's at, he's basically doing pedophilia type things. So another, the FBI actually, as part of his file, interviewed a woman by the name of Elizabeth Beresford, Beresford. She was a baroness who knew about his pedophilia. According to the FBI file, she states that in these circles, that Lord Mountbatten and his wife were considered persons of, this is a quote, extremely low morals. It was also known, quote, to be a homosexual with a perversion for young boys. Her opinion of him was that he was an unfit man to direct any military operation because of this condition. But she also says that his wife was considered equally erratic. So again, all in the family here. This interview happened in one of the New York field offices. The agents opened more files on him after World War II because where did he go? NATO. He becomes the commander. Like, I don't know if you know how NATO is set up, but they've got like a North division and they've got a South Mediterranean division, and Av South is in Naples. And he was the NATO commander of the Allied forces of the Mediterranean. So you've got the NAV South, Av South, and he was the guy that was in charge of all of that. But again, NATO. And that's where all of Operation GLADIO is managed out of. So you know this guy knows all about it and is involved in it.
The kitchen started to get hot, so he ran to the places where he'd be protected.
Correct. So this author's book also says that his former chauffeur, Ron Perks, often drove him to upmarket gay brothels used by senior naval officers called the Red House in Malta. There's nothing about that sentence that is okay. Nothing. There is more evidence about his sexual pedophilia in the book, where he gives examples of places that he went and things that he did. But for the purpose of this article, we're just going to keep marching on. So this is where it gets really interesting. The Provisional IRA, which is the Ireland group of rabble rousers in Northern Ireland that has been revealed in many books that I've read about Operation GLADIO to be a GLADIO operation. They all knew that Mountbatten was a pedophile. And eventually, known GLADIO operators assassinate Mountbatten, and we'll get to that in a minute. There was actually 2 plots to do it. The first one happened in 1975, but it got called off. And then they did another one, and I think that was actually happened in 1979. Yeah, 79. And so he gets basically assassinated. And that's almost exactly what happened to Aldo Moro in Italy. When they first was going to kill the prime minister there, they had a plan that got called off at the last minute, and then they exercised another one. And that one went off without a hitch. They kidnapped him and assassinated him.
Well, I mean, think about it. Well, at least I think about it in terms of like Jeffrey Epstein. Who did they know? He wasn't the only one doing this stuff.
Correct.
So
And
he knows people. So then he becomes dangerous.
Well, and what's interesting about Jeffrey Epstein is the overlap between Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell and England, right? The pictures of them on the throne, sitting in the chairs, and Robert Maxwell basically, working part-time for MI6 and part-time for Mossad. So the overlap here is huge. So anyway, the man responsible for trafficking the boys to Classibon was a guy by the name of Joseph Mains, M-A-I-N-S. He was the warden of Kinkora, the boys' home. 2 of the boys referred to in the book, these are not their real names because they didn't want their real names known, but we will refer to them as the same names that this author uses in his books for the rest of this article. And they didn't print everything that they knew from the boys because the boys knew a lot of names. One was very good about taking pictures of different things and had like a photogenic memory of being able to discuss details, even remembering license plate numbers. And so unequivocally, this information was corroborated. Can't say there was a lot done about it, but they knew for a fact these kids were not lying. So the most significant piece of information was that a boy, one of the boys ends up committing suicide, and his name was Stephen Waring, W-A-R-I-N-G. And Mountbatten actually abused him at his country estate in 1977. Mountbatten always visited his castle in August. Stephen Waring was a resident at Kinkora Boys' Home at the time. He committed suicide within a few months of being taken to the Mountbatten estate. He had escaped from Kinkora and made it as far as Liverpool, where he was captured and put back into that home. Waring had been put. He hid away on a ship, and he was put on a ship to return him, and he basically jumped overboard and committed suicide. Because he didn't want to go back to the home to continue to be abused. The abuse suffered by Waring and his friend, who is, as far as the author went, was named Sean. Again, that's not his real name. Were both taken to the same, and they're very descriptive about describing the building on the estate that they were taken to. And did so separately, basically corroborating each other, but not at the same time. So they knew that they were being taken there because Mains who was sitting in the front seat of the vehicle, told them when they would cross the border from one area to the other area. And while the mainstream British media was happy to report all about the FBI files and the Ron Perks revelations about all of this going on, they have completely ignored anything that was in this guy's book about the association of Kincora's boys' home, and that being part of this vice ring of them supplying boys to this upper crust elite group of pedophiles. So they're only going to give you the information that they want you to know. They've also ignored the story of another boy who had been ensnared in this entire ring. And his name, made up name, was Amal, A-M-A-L. He was what appears to be Indian. He was not like an Anglo white kid. Sean, the second kid, was 16 years old when he says that he was driven from the Kincora boys' home to Belfast to Clossibon's estate in 1977. As the men who had brought them waited outside, Sean remembers being taken into a darkened room. He was joined by basically Mountbatten. They engaged in some level of sexual activity, and yuck crap goes on. And basically, he only found out who that guy was when Lord Mountbatten's photo gets splashed all over the news in 1979, 2 years later, when he was assassinated. That's how this kid finds out who was having sex with him. The author also says that he has spoken directly to Sean, and Sean had said that he remembered recognizing what he referred to as a weird castle, because they didn't take him to the actual castle. They took him to a building on the estate. And you can look at the pictures of this building. So this other kid, the third kid, Amal, was 16 when he was brought to Mountbatten. And again, in 1977, he was taken down there 4 times during the summer. And each time he didn't take him to the estate. They took this kid to a hotel. And, you know, there's a lot of information about what they did sexually in that book. I'm not going to go into the details, but they definitely had sex. And basically, he was not actually a resident. He lived nearby. So I don't know. Again, there's 2 other entities that we'll get to.
One of the statements the Amal makes that I find here, and I'm not going to go into the nasty stuff either, because it's reading it, I'm like, that is gross.
It is
But
gross.
one thing he says is that he was told that he liked dark-skinned people, especially Sri Lankan people, as they were very friendly and very good-looking.
Yeah, and this guy's old, right?
Freaking
It's
sicko,
sickening.
man.
Yeah, it's sickening. So Joe Maines was an associate of a guy by the name of Captain Peter Montgomery, who was a deputy Lord Lieutenant. Now, in the royal family, those jobs are a very big job. These deputy Lord Lieutenants. He also was a pedophile, and he also preyed on kids from this Kincora. But here's the other 2. The second one was called Williamson House. That was another home that the headmaster was using kids to supply them to elites. The third one was Royal Portora School, Portora School. And again, the people that are involved in this are at the tippy top of the elite pyramid in England. These aren't like your county seat person working, 5 tiers down. This is the big guys. Montgomery's family owned an estate nearby, and Montgomery, too, was tied to British military intelligence and worked as a military intelligence officer during World War II. So, Montgomery also had a connection to Buckingham Palace through the keeper of the Queen's pictures, a guy by the name of Sir Anthony Blunt. Montgomery was Blunt's first boyfriend. Now, they're both guys. And basically had a lifelong friendship. Blunt is famous because he was a Soviet mole inside of their FBI, MI6, or MI5, sorry. He also got outed as part of the Cambridge spy ring. So again, this is all of the people in the intelligence. And that's why the more I read this, the more it looks like exactly what we're dealing with in the United States. It says that Blunt always kept a room for Montgomery in his London residence. Blunt often visited Montgomery at a place called 5 Mileton. They enjoyed trips to Ireland and pedophilia wherever they went. Montgomery trafficked boys from the Portora Royal School to parties for other pedophiles. Montgomery was almost certain the link between Mainz and Mountbatten as far as bringing boys down there. The abuse Waring suffered was not only the abuse that he suffered during the summer, because this author had also reported that during the summer of 1977, a guy by the name of Richard Kerr, who was also a resident at Kincora, was summoned by Joe Mainz and told that a guy by the name of Josh Cardwell, a senior figure in this whole pedophile ring, had called and wanted him and Waring to come down to a harbor. So at the time, Cardwell was the chairman of the Belfast Corporation Welfare Committee and in charge of Kincora. He was also in charge of Williams House. So the very people that are in charge of the children's welfare in these locations are the actual pedophiles. And this hits another thing that we have discovered in working through Operation GLADIO and all of these nonprofits. All of the people that are like the people at the WWF, and keep in mind, all of these people are part of the WWF. They're all part of the anti-communist leagues that get set up. So that's where you get the overlap with Operation GLADIO. They're all on the boards of these children's charities. Every single person we've looked up of any stature in Operation GLADIO sits on some board of some child charity. It's crazy. So anyway, the boys knew exactly what Cardwell's edict entailed for them as far as they were going to get abused. On this particular trip, Kerr would be delivered into the hands of someone he referred to as a TV star in London. Now, he knows obviously who it is, but he does not disclose it. He didn't want to disclose it to the author. So Kerr knew Caldwell as Joseph Cardwell. He recalls how he wore a funny hat and drove a blue minivan that he used to take the boys out of Kincora onto these trips for them to be abused. Stephen Waring and Richard Kerr boarded a ferry to Liverpool, and in Liverpool, they were met by a guy by the name of Michael Kerr. Michael A. They didn't say his whole last name. Kerr was familiar with him from Manchester, where he'd been abused at the Rembrandt Hotel by this same guy. And he was also in the company of a man named Derek. The group headed to the premise of Liverpool near a train station. And by now it was morning of the next day. The boys were basically put in a basement, and they talk about mattresses being thrown all over the basement. There's other kids in the basement. Someone comes back and gets them. They're taken to 2 different locations. And basically the one kid was able to take photos of some of the things that were around him. One of the guys, Stephen J., also knew who Joe Maines and Eric Witchell is. And they basically were involved in running that Williamson house, which was another pedophile supply place for these people. Witchell was the first member of the Anglo-Irish vice ring to have abused Kerr while he was only 8 years old. During the 1970s, Witchell resided in both Liverpool and Belfast. Witchell was later put in charge of Williamson House, where Kerr resided before he was sent to Kincora in 1975. So again, all of the people that are in charge of all of these places are pedophiles. Witchell and Cardwell supplied boys from Williamson House to abusers favored by the vice ring. Kerr was one of those boys. And then several of them actually, when you start reading some of the newspaper clips, several of them goes on after they were abused and committed suicide because they couldn't live with that. The death of boys from Williamson House are not to be confused with Waring's death. On this trip, Kerr and Waring reached Manchester with their 2 escorts and basically put them in a first-class compartment in the train where this Michael A. and this Stephen J. abused them on their way to be abused. Then it talks about them separating the 2 boys. One goes to one location and gets abused. Another one meets up with this television star who basically escorts him to this location and then literally kicks him out the door when he's finished with them to make his way back to try to find out how to get home. He just leaves them stranded. It's just everything about this is so gross. What the adult didn't realize was that Kerr, the guy the little kid that he's kicking out, was basically very resentful of what was happening. And he's the kid that has this photogenic memory and also takes photos of all of their cars, all of their plates. So he was later able to identify a lot of them, which is how the author gets his information. And he does have the information too. This kid shared it with him. The kid just was not ready to share it with everybody else. So the author respected that and didn't publish it in the book. But he knows it. Kerr later recognized the man that had abused him from a guest appearance on a hugely popular show called The Minder. One of the actor's numerous television programs, but he was also on BBC and other shows, some of which were actually made for children. It says, let's see, on another trip, Kerr and Waring were taken to the south of England, where another television star, a household name, far better known than even Jimmy Savile at the time, came into the room and chose Waring and took him away for several hours.
Like these are famous people that can go be with any adult that they probably want to be, but they're going to target children.
Yes. And what we need to understand, which, you know, Liz Crokin has done such a wonderful job. This is exactly what happens here in Hollywood. What we're reading happens all over the world. I just told you that their guy in Belgium was Marc Dutroux. There's one of these guys in every major city. There's a guy like this in New York. There's a guy like this in LA. There's a guy like this in San Francisco. These networks are everywhere. And the people that are inside of these networks are people that whose names you know, that you see all the time. And our intelligence apparatuses know all of this is going on. And they use it to blackmail these people. They don't do it to save the children.
You know what? Part of me wonders now that they're not coming after our Second Amendment because they're afraid we'll defend ourselves. They're coming after the Second Amendment because they're afraid that when people learn the truth about all this, they're going to come for them.
I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that at all. So anyway, the author goes, he identifies a Kinkora whistleblower by the name of Robert Bryans, who tried to expose Mountbatten's abuse of these boys in 1980. Bryans is the man who was decisive in exposing Sir Anthony Blunt that we mentioned above, who had been the KGB mole, and also the person who was in charge of the Queen's pictures. So, but again, that KGB mole was in the intelligence apparatus. So Bryans, the whistleblower, knew Blunt well from his frequent trips to Ulster, where Blunt seized opportunities to abuse underage boys. Bryans tried to expose Blunt and a guy by the name of James Molyneux, is Molyneaux, who was an active MP in the British government, as well as Mountbatten, in a letter that he wrote in 1989. And here's a quote out of it. Although Margaret Thatcher showed loyalty to those who had eased her path by fair means or foul to office, her forthrightness and inexperience enraged many. While Sir Anthony Blunt had a cozy relationship with the security services based on his knowledge of incriminating political and sexual leanings among the royal family, Thatcher showed herself to be unsympathetic to this delicate quid pro quo. She unbalanced the status quo by admitting that Blunt had been a Soviet agent in the House of Commons in 1979. This portrayal risked letting all sorts of other skeletons out of the cupboard. So in other words, you as the prime minister are supposed to cover up for a spy, because if you don't, somebody's going to let loose blackmail that's going to embarrass the royal family. That's what we just read. Not the least of these was the long-standing arrangement whereby Kinkora and Portora boys' schools were used as homosexual brothels by many prominent figures, including Lord Mountbatten, James Molyneux, Leslie Mackey, and Blunt's high-placed friends. Blunt, however, kept his mouth shut, and Thatcher learned her lesson. The establishment knows best, unquote. So now we're going to get to the Operation Gladio part of it. The IRA, as a paramilitary organization, i.e. GLADIO, which knew about the Anglo-Irish vice ring, of which Kincora was a part, the UDA had a home under surveillance. And he wrote another article about that, but this is going to give us enough information for this. The Village magazine says that the independent inquiry into the child sexual abuse in London has not displayed any interest at all in Lord Mountbatten, Eric Witchell, or the Irish wing of the Anglo-Irish viceroy. Time will tell if they seek the Garda logs that we talked about at the beginning, which they still have not released. Also, Richard Kerr was not investigated at all as part of this. So they have an investigative authority, but the investigative authority only wanted to investigate people that didn't matter. So Richard Kerr suffered abuse at the hands of a guy by the name of Enoch Powell, who is also an MP in the British government, and ran to be in charge of the Tory party, which back then was a huge deal. Kerr was also abused by senior Tory cabinet minister who was once a contender for the Tory leadership. There are many, many other VIPs who abused him. He has only released the names of a few and basically didn't want to talk about the rest of them. So that takes us to that. Now, what I want to do right now is I want to run down here to Mountbatten on Wikipedia. When you look at him, if you go down to, let me get back to it. It's at the very bottom of it. Let's see. Okay. Alleged plots against Harold Wilson. Now, Harold Wilson is the guy that basically got gladioed, and who I compared to Trump in my story that I mentioned at the beginning of this. So it says in May 1968. Now, keep in mind, at the end of 68, you've got Eisenhower in office. No, sorry. You've got, that was at the end of the 50s. So you've got Johnson in the White House in America. And Mountbatten attended a private meeting with a press baron called Cecil King. And Cecil King basically owned things like the Daily Mirror. I mean, he was a big, he was a director at the Bank of England. He was a big, big deal. And the science advisor, Wright, alleged in a book, an author, Wright, alleged that up to 30 MI5 officers had joined a secret campaign to undermine the Labor government of Harold Wilson. And that King, Cecil King, the media guy who is part of, all media is part of the intel community, that King was actually an MI5 agent as well. King allegedly urged Mountbatten to become the leader of the government by basically overthrowing Harold Wilson. And then it basically says that the Queen actually got involved to dissuade Mountbatten from plotting against Wilson. in a 2006 BBC documentary, The Plot Against Harold Wilson, it's alleged that there had been another plot involving Mountbatten to oust Wilson during his second term. So again, they're doing to him, Harold Wilson, exactly what they did to Trump. The period was characterized by high inflation, increasing unemployment. The alleged plot revolved around right wing, which is what they call Operation Gladio, former military figures who were supposedly building private armies. What's that sound like? Gladio, to counter the perceived threat from labor unions and the Soviet Union, anti-communist. They believed that the Labor Party was unable and unwilling to counter the developments and that Wilson was a Soviet agent. Because when you don't like somebody, you call them a communist. The documentary makers alleged that a coup was planned to overthrow Wilson and replace him with Mountbatten using private armies and sympathizers. They're planning a coup using Gladio operatives. That's what that paragraph just said. The first official history of MI5, called The Deference of the Realm, implied that there was a plot against Wilson and that MI5 did have a file on him. Yet it also made clear that the plot was in no way official and that any activity centered on a small group of discontent officers. I don't think Lord Mountbatten is small chump change. This much had already been confirmed by a former cabinet secretary by the name of Lord Hunt. He concluded in a secret inquiry conducted in 1996 that there was absolutely no doubt at all that a few malcontents in MI5, a lot of them like Peter Wright, who were right-wing, malicious, and serious personal grudges, were plotting to overthrow the government of England. So then you get down to the sexual allegations of this guy, and it says there's a couple of repeats here from that article, like the fact that he was taken to the Red House, the upscale gay bar, frequented by naval officers. That just blows my mind still. So another guy that belonged to the Royal Historical Society wrote in the FBI, and they're talking about that file that we have on him that verified that he was a pedophile. In 2019, files became public and indicated that in the 1940s, as early as 1940, they had allegations that he was a homosexual and a pedophile and never did a single thing about it. There was one other thing in here. In October 2022, Arthur Smith, a former resident of Kincora, waived his anonymity to make allegations of child abuse against Mountbatten. The allegations are part of a civil case against the state authorities responsible for the care of children in Kincora. Smith claims that he was raped twice by Mountbatten in encounters by the house father that was in charge of Kincora. So I try to, I'm not going to say I avoid this subject, but I don't try to focus on this for lots of different reasons. But I did want to get down here to the assassination real quick before we get done, because it's very enlightening as well. If you look at it talking about in 1978, the IRA had allegedly attempted to shoot Mountbatten as he was aboard his boat, but basically the sniper never got a shot off. So Mountbatten basically in 1979 went lobster potting and tuna fishing on his boat. And Thomas McMahon, who he has his own, I mean, he's basically a GLADIO operator, had slipped onto an unguarded boat the previous night and attached a radio-controlled bomb. When Mountbatten and his party was taken to the boat just a few hundred yards from shore, the bomb was detonated. And this is very important. I want you to listen to this. The boat was destroyed by the force of the blast. Mountbatten's legs were both blown off. Mountbatten, then 79 years old, was pulled alive from the water by nearby fishermen, but died of his injuries before he got to shore. Also aboard the boat was his elder daughter, her husband, their twin sons, and her daughter's husband's mother, Paul Maxwell, a young crew member, and it says that Nicholas and Paul, which were one of the twins, were killed by the blast, and that the mother-in-law died of her injuries the next day. The attack, Queen Elizabeth II received messages of condolence, because who would ever miss a pedophile person? But, Jimmy Carter, Pope John Paul II, they all send their condolences. And it says the Irish American community were disgusted with the attacks, especially since many American soldiers served under Mountbatten. Nowhere in here did they even talk about the fact that he was a pedophile, right? And it has a whole bunch of things about what everybody said about him, but it says 2 hours before the bomb detonated, Thomas McMahon had been arrested at a Garda checkpoint between Longford and Grenard on suspicion of driving a stolen vehicle. He was tried for the assassination, convicted based on forensic evidence. But listen to the forensic evidence. Flakes of paint from the boat and traces of nitroglycerin on his clothes. How do you get traces of paint from a boat? By walking on a boat and putting a bomb down. How do you get traces of paint? Just saying. You're the detective. I'm not. I think that's weird.
It's very weird.
Okay. That's not something you normally get off of a boat. Having been on a few boats. So anyway, this guy ends up getting out of jail. He gets sentenced for a long sentence, but he basically gets forgiven and gets out, like many of our GLADIO operators that take the fall for things like this. Yeah, so I think Mountbatten became inconvenient because the heat in the late 70s was getting turned up on the exposure of him having done these things. And
he was a higher end Hunter Biden.
Yes. A better connected.
Because look, I mean, that everybody that kind of follows his story, he's reckless. And that recklessness is what's leading everybody back to the entire Biden family. The quid pro quo, the China stuff. And, Mountbatten was the same thing. Just probably wasn't a cokehead either, or a crackhead, or both.
Well, I will tell you that may not be true because he was the governor of India. And India is the original creation of the poppy that was then force-fed over to China because of Britain. So that's another facet of this entire story. Mountbatten was in India during the time that India was supplying all of the opium to China in order to drug all of the Chinese. And that's how we got Chiang Kai-shek being the opium warlord in China, because he was getting all of the supply of opium from India while Mountbatten was there.
Jesus. These guys are freaking savages, man.
Yeah. And so then the irony of the whole thing is Mao, who we've been told is worse than, gum stuck on your shoe, he's the guy that comes down and kicks Chiang Kai-shek out of China because he doesn't want the Chinese taking cocaine or heroin or whatever. So somehow in this twisted, gummed up mess that we have here, all of the people that we've been told to hate are the good guys, and all of the people that we've been told are the good guys are the bad guys, right? That's 100%. What I keep coming back to.
Yes. And here, well, for the audience that's listening right now, because we're live, we love that. Do we think they just stopped doing this stuff? Of course not. Of course not. If anything, it's probably worse now because of the ability to conceal it with technology. And absolutely. I mean, listen, and I'm sure the number is way higher because this is the number of 18 months ago, 85,000 kids missing from the southern border that were brought across. No whereabouts. We have federal whistleblowers that are talking about this. I mean, where do you think they're sending these kids to? You had this freaking freak that was talking about he liked dark-skinned people from Sri Lanka. I mean, that's
it's gross.
Well, look, I was contemplating bringing this up or not, but I'm going to bring it up. So I have a buddy in Nashville, Tennessee. We used to do a show on here, Colonel. We used to call it the Sean Taylor Files. That's his name. It's public, so I know he doesn't mind me talking about it. But he did, so what I did in law enforcement, he did the same thing, but he did the narcotics end of it. So I did the gang stuff, he did the narcotic stuff. Both, but his field of expertise was specifically narcotics. And so our, after law enforcement life, our cases ended up, crossing paths. We connected, we did some shows. Well, we stopped doing shows because he ended up picking up a job as the assistant police chief in Millersville, city out in just north of Nashville in Tennessee. Well, he ends up connecting with Craig Solomon Sawyer and Greg's group that goes and, tracks down the child pedophiles, child predators. So a few weeks ago, his agency with Greg's, the police agency with Craig's agency, they do a collaboration where they identify a little over 70 child predators. Well, and this was in the Nashville area. Well, we did talk about this. I do remember I told you about this. So, freaking NC5 News with, their big reporter Williams goes and starts targeting Assistant Police Chief Sean Taylor, saying, well, he was on Alpha Show and this show and this show, and he's a conspiracy theorist. It's like the dude just took down how many child predators? And instead of saying, hey, how can we help you? Can we put these people's photos and names here? It hasn't stopped, Colonel. They have given so much airtime, and we know this industry, airtime is expensive. And they've dedicated so much airtime to try to go after this assistant police chief.
Alpha, I will guarantee you, I'll bet you $100 right now that station chief and or that reporter are pedophiles.
I do not doubt it. And so, there's been information provided in the back channels, but nothing that's been able to been, vetted or corroborated. But I'll tell you what.
You don't go after people like that for doing good.
I agree.
They think they're doing something. They think that deputy police chief is doing something bad, and that's why they're going after him.
They know that leash is getting shorter and shorter, and pretty soon you're going to see who's holding the leash, and they're terrified.
Yeah,
they're terrified. I'll probably bring them on here in a few weeks to do an update because there's an update of things going on, and I know that they're panicking. And do you mind sharing what you kind of told me about what was that route a little north of Nashville? regarding military bases, if you remember.
To
Because
Fort Campbell.
yeah, so it was a route that came from New York because of the way they were pushing all this stuff from New York down into the Tennessee, Nashville area. But that I forget
Oh,
the
oh, okay. So, just so that everybody knows, because of what's been going on in New York City, a lot of the high tech and banking um, people that have corporations in New York City, just like Trump when he moved to Mar-a-Lago out of New York City, there's this massive high end movement from New York City to Nashville. If you pull up a skyline of Nashville 30 years ago and compare it to today, they look nothing alike. Nashville has been overran by New York City high-end business companies. And I just told you that in New York City, any large metropolitan area that is a destination for men to be away from their families on business trips will have these networks set up. And Nashville, as the recipient of all of these industrial heads from New York City, will have that network set up there to accommodate these perverts. And I think your friend stumbled upon it.
Look at how desperate they are. Let me bring this up on the screen. So, well, it's public knowledge, so I know you won't mind me saying. So, two attorneys he has representing him right now is Todd Callender and Thomas Renz. And a lot of people are probably familiar with both of those names. So I told him, I don't know how you pulled that juice, man. But you need to pull that kind of juice for me, brother. But once again, now, since they can't get the police chief and they can't get my friend, the assistant police chief, now they're going after the attorneys. Like anybody that wants to be a part of the defense of this, they are going after them. And this is from News Channel 5 right here. And obviously there's Phil Williams there. But and the reason I share this is because this is the same shit that we're covering out. From, obviously we're not talking about the Royals, and my buddy's not that high profile person, but in
No,
the
it's the
community,
same thing, though.
yeah, but it's the same thing. And in the community, the assistant chief is a pretty, that's a high ranking official.
Well, they're going after the people trying to save the children instead of protecting the children. You could have spent every bit of that airtime telling the story of any one of those children. You could have told the story of where those children came from. Instead, you attack their protector. It tells you everything.
Well, it does. And because I come from a background in law enforcement, and I've worked with, reporters and things like that work with the agency, because you do want to have some type of a working relationship with these entities. If they truly cared, there's an internal affairs process that they would have followed.
Correct.
But literally, 4 days after the operation, coming out, hitting the media, no, that was that they could care less if he's a police chief anywhere in the world. They just don't want him to be a police chief there doing what he's doing. And that's why the political pressure. And and going back to the Mountbatten guy, they still have his gravestone like all nice and everything with honors and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, how, when you have all this information that's come out, can you still have that? Like, yeah. they just, it is disgusting.
It's right in your face all the time.
And it's in our government too.
Yes, and that's kind of the whole reason why I wanted to kind of take time out to do this particular show, because what we have talked about, the drug element, we've talked about weapons, we've talked about obviously this is part of the human trafficking element, and then all of that is used as part of the blackmail grease in the hub that keeps the Operation GLADIO moving along. And you see directly where those comments about Margaret Thatcher and how if she outed the guy that's the Soviet KGB. So just let this sink in for just a second. You have a guy that's a Soviet spy in your government, and they were pissed off at Margaret Thatcher because she outed the spy, because she could have started the sequence of outing all the pedophiles. What the fuck is going on?
It's everything, Colonel. How do we have Ghislaine Maxwell charged and convicted, serving her sentence, but we don't know who the guys were on there that were committing the crimes, or women? How's that possible? You have, you have Ashley Biden's diary that has information in there that any law enforcement officer knows, that the information that's in there, with specific references to the inappropriate showers and the sentences above that, I was molested here by these people. This was inappropriate. At a minimum, in any law enforcement agency anywhere in this country, at a minimum, that would require, by law, not option, by law, because mandated reporters, an investigation by law. And instead of the FBI pursuing the different jurisdictions to investigate where these things could have potentially happened, they go after the person that released the diary.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the?
Yeah. It's hard to wrap your head around, but the information has to get out.
It does. Donnie Vision says this needs to be a regular topic on places like X. You guys know, feel free to clip this information. This content is free. Clip it and share it. Share it everywhere. I would ask you do me the favor and you tag the Colonel and you reference her channel so people can find her and get more information.
Yeah, Donnie Vision is in my noon podcast or X space all the time.
Well, I'll tell you what, Colonel, because I know it's very late for you on the East Coast, second best coast, because I'm on the West Coast. But let's bring up Operation GLADIO Part 18. Let's go through a few of these comments, and then we'll call it a night after that. So let me bring this up on the screen. And we have Gabe's Pride says, these Operation GLADIO posts are the absolute best, most compelling. The synergy between you and the Colonel is energizing. Alpha. I know I'm pretty lucky to be able to have these comments. We're all lucky because we all get to do this. And the live part is very cool. Captain Brad Fry, Colonel, 1976, when the North Koreans did the axe murders in the DMZ, we flew on flights out of Misawa, advised by thank you. Advised by Sky King. How about going over it? Sky King, do not answer message to follow. Then everyone on a headset wrote down the message and we all gathered around the navcom and made sure the message was complete. What the heck is he talking about here? Do we know?
I don't know. Let me put my glasses on. Hold on. 76, when the North Koreans did the axe murders in the DMZ. Oh gosh, you're really pulling at my memory strings here. I'll tell you what. Let me do a screenshot here, and I promise that I will come back to that next week.
All right, that sounds very interesting.
Yeah.
I want to know.
Yeah, I know exactly what he's talking about, but there's like about 3 question marks here, so I'm gonna have to come back to that.
Breadmaker62 says, okay, blown away again tonight. I think the world of General Flynn and Admiral Mike Rogers. To hear what followed behind them wasn't fit to fill their boots makes me sick. I agree with you. Thank you, Colonel and Alpha, for opening my eyes on issues my mind hasn't even considered yet. God bless you both, and many thanks for your service to our country. You're more appreciated than you know. God bless our military. Amen to that. Our men and women in there still need our support. Call sign Cujo sneaks one in there with great show. Thank you. We got Loyalto 45. Our electric bill until this must have been when I brought up electricity. Loyal to 40. Oh, loyal to 45. I'm sorry. Our electric bill in Texas is around 200 and 300 a month, 400 being incredibly high. And that's an average home around 1,500 square feet. Low to 45. Don't come to California. You will cry so freaking much with that. Cool one. Green Berets have been involved in GLADIO ops, at least starting in the Phoenix program in Vietnam. One of the main ones there was Project Medusa.
Yeah.
Project Medusa. I don't think we've talked about that one. That doesn't sound familiar to me. Yeah.
No, we haven't. I am familiar with it though. But I will tell you, and I have said this repeatedly on every social media, we are in the middle of a modern day Phoenix program. The tail sign on Phoenix, for those of you who don't know what it is, it is emblematic of what we found in all of the GLADIO operations, where they make people disappear. So they basically would go into villages. They trained the national police. The Michigan State University took had a contract and went over there and trained basically like a national police force. And they basically were like School of America's graduates, where they beat the living crap out of people. They kidnapped them, they tortured them, and they got them to rat out neighbors that may have this sympathy or that sympathy or whatever. And then they would kill them. And the modern day, I've said this many times to Mike Benz, he talks about all of the cyber disinformation, censoring, and all this other stuff. His program, whatever you call it, the cyber focus, is the modern day Phoenix program, where you make people disappear. You debank them, you take them off of all social media. It is the modern day Phoenix program. And they know that, and that's why you see the CIA behind every bit of this. It just recently came out that the CIA was in every single one of those soft coups against Trump, the 51. Every bit of it is a modern day Phoenix program inside the United States.
And it's made its way onto social media platforms, and we see the operatives doing that stuff every single day. Be careful these spaces you guys are in. Trust your discernment. Let's wrap it up with 3 more. We'll go with the last one that made its way in. Dank 12655. Everyone must watch ex-CBP agent JJ Carroll's interview. He tells it like it is about the border from his personal experiences. Fill that 10% of knowledge base we all need. I'll send you the link to the show I did with them, Colonel. Holy smokes. I thought I knew it was bad. Like, I really knew it was bad. And after doing the show with him, I was like, holy shit, we're in trouble. Because I go into the operational planning of how do we fix it, and just the methods we have to do to fix it, that even scares me. Like, I'm not comfortable with that stuff either. Let's see. Muzzy IEQE. So just started Eye of the Storm in Badlands, and they played Billy Joel's We Didn't Start the Fire. But when you listen to the lyrics, I think we did. Seems like there's a lot of GLADIO in that song. Speaking of Eye of the Storm, you were just on there last night, and from the feedback I'm hearing, you guys were awesome. You guys go to Badlands, watch last night's Eye of the Storm featuring the Colonel. You want to give people a teaser about what was kind of covered there with you guys?
Well, so it was definitely a fun show. I've known Stormy Patriot Joe for a long time. I had never actually talked to Paul other than in the lead up to that show. So the interaction was amazing. And the real time, it was an amazing show. Paul did not know very much. Stormy Patriot Joe has heard me talk before. We have a Badlands fan club meetup in Central Florida. And we actually just had one on Saturday. I hosted it at my house. And Stormy stood us up. So no, he was in New York.
Oh, Stormy.
Yeah. So anyway, he's come to the other ones, and Red Pill 78 came to one of them. And so it's just been a lot of fun. And Paul had read the most recent article that I just put out, number 2 for Badlands Media, on their Substack. And so he's just now getting into even understanding what GLADIO is. And it blew his mind how closely it interplays with some of the Q drops. And so like in live time, we're talking about some of the different operations, and but we didn't start until 10:30 last night. So I was like, oh my gosh, you guys are killing me. I'm so far past my bedtime. But anyway, it was a lot of fun. And I have gotten a lot of really positive feedback today as a result of that as well.
I think that is such a phenomenal collaboration of minds right there. And Paul, such a good heart, that guy.
Yeah.
When we did
he loved Eisenhower, so I had to take my pen and pop his bubble.
Yes.
That's what I do.
Hey, the truth is sometimes it's hard to swallow, but we've got to swallow it. I mean, I'm there with General Mattis. Like that one still hurts every time I think about it. But it is what it is. One thing, when you guys have a chance, ask Paul. After the Dallas Guard event, he went to the area where JFK was assassinated, and he went down to where the sewer drain is to get that perspective of where that shot could have took, being consistent with the head pop back and all that. Very cool. If you guys have a chance to talk to him, we'll go back to the last comment here. Comes from Snook2, says, I was not a real Alpha fan when I was introduced to him on Gitmo, but I can say he has truly come into his own, and I adore him after this GLADIO series. Thank you, Colonel and Alpha, for this series. So enlightening, shocking, saddening, and maddening, and I never wanted to end. Well, Snook2, I appreciate you sticking around when you weren't a big fan of me, and that I was able to win over your heart.
For you, Alpha.
You know what?
I cleaned up your image there.
You did, and it's in the emails that I send out. Saving the world one conversation at a time, which means every single listener, every single person watching this is so important to winning this war. So to help me win over Snook2, that is a great way to wrap up the show tonight. Colonel, you're on X every day. You're building a new GLADIO headquarters on your property. Where can people find you? What kind of stuff you got going on? And we'll call it a night.
Okay, so I'm on Substack and Rumble at the Colonel's Corner, and on X at spelt out Colonel Towner, on True Social Colonel Watkins, and we do a show every day at noon for about an hour to an hour and a half, going country by country, basically describing the different GLADIO operations that have taken place in the different countries. And then regionally, when you kind of zoom out and you look at the interplay of those countries and the fact that you see the same thing continent after continent after continent, you get the full scale of the scope of what we're dealing with. So
I'll tell you guys, every time I see a little purple thing on X, it's like the Colonel. And you know what that means? Exposure. Breadmaker coming in clutch at the end. Breadmaker62, he says, thank you both again. You bring the fire with the $50 Rumble rent. Breadmaker, you, amongst all the other people, bring the support. So thank you. You guys, all the links to find the Colonel down there in the description. You don't have to write them down. Go click them. Support us. Smash that thumb on the way out. Tomorrow, for those of you that normally watch SitRep at 9 p.m. Eastern with me and my brother CanCon, there's a debate. I'm still wondering if that's really going to happen. I know we're the day before, but Biden and Trump debate number 1. Badlands is going to be hosting that. I'll be on the panel with that conversation. So no SitRep tomorrow night, but we will be covering that if it happens. I still don't know. Colonel, on the way out, You think they follow through, or do you think something happens at the last second? I think they're pulling the plug at the last second. No way they're going to let Biden debate Trump.
All right, I'll take the other end.
Okay, there we go, you guys. We'll catch you guys next week. Go support the Colonel, support me, support freedom. First in, last out. Semper Fi, everybody, and good night.